are you doing here? Get your hands where I can see them!
What are you doing here? This is my house. Get your hands where I can see them. This is my house. Turn around. Hey, what? Hey, turn around. All right, this is my house. I live here. The metal handcuffs dug into his wrists as 3 police officers pushed him against the hood of their patrol car. His house keys lay scattered on the ground next to envelopes, all bearing his name and this exact address. The numbers on the mailbox matched the numbers on the front door behind him. Inside that house sat his coffee mug, still warm on the kitchen counter. His laptop was open on the dining room table where he'd been working just minutes ago. His slippers were still on his feet. Yet here he was, face pressed against hot metal, while neighbors stopped and stared. All because he walked outside to check his mail on a Wednesday afternoon. Before we go any further, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be heard, and your subscription helps share them with more people who need to know what's really happening in our world. His name was Marcus Chen. He was 38 years old, an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, though he spent most days working remotely from his home office. The house was modest, a 3-bedroom ranch style with green shutters he'd painted himself 2 summers ago. He'd lived there for 7 years. 7 years of mortgage payments. 7 years of maintaining the lawn. 7 years of waving to neighbors and signing for packages. 7 years of being part of this community on Oakwood Avenue. That Wednesday started like any other. Marcus woke up at 6:30, made breakfast, logged into his work computer by 8. He spent the morning reviewing financial statements and preparing tax documents for clients. Routine. Normal. Unremarkable. Around 2 in the afternoon, he took a break to stretch his legs. He noticed through the window that the mail truck had passed by. Without thinking much about it, because why would he slipped on his house shoes and walked outside. The mailbox stood at the curb about 30 feet from his front door. Marcus opened it and pulled out the stack. Bills, mostly. A magazine subscription. Some promotional flyers. He was flipping through the envelopes, already walking back toward his house, when he heard it. A car pulling up fast behind him. 2 patrol cars came to a stop in the middle of the street, blocking his driveway. 4 officers got out quickly, their movements sharp and purposeful. Marcus looked up, confused. One officer's hand rested on his hip, right near his weapon. Marcus's stomach dropped instantly. He knew this feeling. Every person of color in America knows this feeling. That sudden awareness that something ordinary has just become dangerous. Officer Williams spoke first, his voice loud and commanding. What was Marcus doing? Marcus held up the mail, his other hand visible and open. He explained calmly, this was his mail, from his mailbox. This was his house. Officer Garcia circled around to Marcus's right side, creating distance between himself and his partner. It was a tactical move, making it harder for Marcus to watch both officers at once. Garcia asked if Marcus had identification. Marcus said yes. It was inside the house, in his wallet, on the kitchen counter. Williams asked what address this was. Marcus told him. The same address printed on every piece of mail in his hand. Williams asked how long he'd lived here. Marcus said 7 years. Williams asked if he could prove that. Marcus felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level. His ID inside would prove it. The mail in his hand proved it. What more did they need? That's when Williams told him to put his hands where they could see them. Marcus still had the mail in his left hand. He raised both hands slowly, the envelopes clearly visible. Garcia radioed for backup. We have a possible mail theft suspect at Oakwood Avenue. Mail theft suspect? Marcus felt the words like a physical blow. He repeated again, this was his house, his mailbox, his mail. But the officers weren't really listening. They weren't hearing him. They were treating him like a criminal who happened to be claiming innocence, rather than a homeowner who happened to be Asian American. A woman came out of the house directly across the street. Mrs. Patterson was 73 years old and had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else on the block. She'd brought Marcus homemade pie when he first moved in. He shoveled her driveway every winter when it snowed. She started hurrying across the street as fast as her legs would carry her, calling out that Marcus lived there, that he was her neighbor, that this was a terrible mistake. Garcia moved to intercept her, putting up a hand. This was official police business. She needed to step back. Mrs. Patterson protested. She'd known Marcus for years. He was a good man. He lived right there in that house. Garcia's voice got firmer. If she interfered, she could be arrested for obstruction. Mrs. Patterson stopped walking but didn't go back inside. She stood on the sidewalk, her face twisted in disbelief and anger, watching this unfold. 2 more patrol cars arrived. Marcus counted 6 officers now. 6 armed officers for one man holding mail at his own mailbox. His heart hammered in his chest. He focused on keeping his breathing steady, keeping his hands visible, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He'd seen the news. He'd read the stories. He knew how these situations could end. Sergeant Davis stepped forward, clearly the ranking officer on scene. He asked Williams for a summary. Williams explained they'd gotten a 911 call about 20 minutes ago, reporting a suspicious person going through mailboxes in this neighborhood. They'd spotted Marcus at this mailbox and stopped to investigate. Marcus interrupted, his voice strained but controlled. He wasn't going through mailboxes. He was going through his mailbox, at his house, where he'd lived for 7 years. Sergeant Davis looked at him, then at the house, then back at Marcus. He asked if Marcus had any proof he lived there. The question hung in the air like smoke. Proof that he lived in his own house. Marcus gestured with his head toward the mail in his raised hands. Every piece had his name and this address on it. Davis glanced at the envelopes but didn't move to take them. He asked if Marcus had identification inside. Marcus confirmed he did. Starts here. Davis made a decision. He told Garcia to detain Marcus while they verified his information. Marcus's eyes widened. Why did he need to be detained? He hadn't done anything wrong. He was standing in his own driveway holding his own mail. Davis responded that it was standard procedure until they could confirm his identity and residency. Standard procedure. Marcus had been reduced to standard procedure at his own home. Garcia pulled out handcuffs. He told Marcus to turn around and put his hands behind his back. Marcus's mind raced. He wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to demand they treat him with the basic dignity of believing him. But he also wanted to survive this encounter. He knew that compliance didn't guarantee safety, but resistance almost certainly guaranteed escalation. So Marcus turned around. The mail fell from his hands, scattering across the driveway. He placed his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Cold metal against his skin. He'd never been handcuffed before, never been arrested, never even gotten a speeding ticket. And now he stood in restraints at his own mailbox. If you've ever felt profiled because of your race, type "profiled" in the comments below. Mrs. Patterson had her phone out now, holding it up with shaking hands. She was recording everything. Other neighbors had emerged from their houses. Mr. Rodriguez from next door stood on his porch, looking stunned. The young family from the corner house watched from their yard, their children peeking out from behind their parents' legs. Everyone could see Marcus in handcuffs, in his own driveway. Williams approached Marcus's front door. He tried the handle, locked. He asked if Marcus consented to them entering to retrieve his identification. Marcus said yes. What choice did he have? But explained his keys were in his right pocket. Garcia reached into Marcus's pocket and fished out the key ring. He tossed it to Williams. Williams unlocked Marcus's front door and walked into his house. Into his private home. Without a warrant. With coerced consent given while Marcus stood in handcuffs, surrounded by armed officers. Williams disappeared inside while Marcus stood there, restrained and humiliated, watching a stranger walk through his home. Several minutes passed. Marcus could only imagine what Williams was doing in there. Looking through his things, judging his space, treating his home like a crime scene. Finally, Williams emerged with Marcus's wallet in hand. He opened it and pulled out the driver's license. Williams handed the license to Davis. Davis examined it carefully. The photo matched Marcus's face. The name matched what Marcus had been saying. The address matched the house they were standing in front of. Davis radioed the license number to dispatch, running it through their system. The response came back moments later. No warrants, no criminal record, clean driving record. Everything checked out exactly as Marcus had been telling them from the very start. But they didn't remove the handcuffs yet. Davis asked more questions. Where did Marcus work? How long had he worked there? Where was his vehicle? Marcus answered each one, fighting to keep the frustration and fear out of his voice. He worked at Henderson & Associates downtown. He'd been there 9 years. His car was in the garage. Davis sent an officer around, back to the garage. The officer peered through the window and confirmed a vehicle was inside. He read the license plate number over the radio. Davis had dispatch run that too. The car was registered to Marcus Chen at this address. Every single thing confirmed Marcus's story. The story he'd been telling since the first moment these officers arrived. The story that should have been obvious from the beginning. Only then did Davis nod to Garcia. Garcia unlocked the handcuffs and removed them from Marcus's wrists. Marcus brought his hands forward, rubbing where the metal had pressed into his skin. Red marks circled both wrists. His hands trembled as the adrenaline that had been keeping him controlled started to break down. Davis handed Marcus his wallet and keys. He explained they'd received a call about suspicious activity in the area. They were following up on that call. Just doing their job. Just doing their job. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. No apology for handcuffing him at his own home. No acknowledgement of how wrong this was. No recognition of what they'd just put him through. Davis said Marcus was free to go. Free to go. Into his own house. The house he'd never actually left except to check his mail. The officers started walking back to their patrol cars. Routine. Just another call. Just another day. Mrs. Patterson rushed over as soon as the officers moved away. She was nearly in tears, asking if Marcus was okay. Marcus nodded but didn't trust himself to speak yet. His throat felt tight, like if he tried to say anything, everything he'd been holding back would come pouring out. Mrs. Patterson told him she'd recorded everything on her phone. Every single second. If he needed it, she had it. The patrol cars pulled away one by one. The small crowd of neighbors began to disperse, heading back into their homes. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked uncomfortable, like they'd witnessed something they wished they hadn't. The street returned to its usual quiet. Marcus bent down and gathered the scattered mail from his driveway. His hand still shook slightly. A phone bill, an advertisement for insurance. A credit card offer, completely normal mail. His mail. He walked back to his house, climbed the steps to his front door, and went inside. He set the mail on the kitchen counter next to his coffee mug. The coffee had gone cold. His laptop screen had gone dark. He looked at the clock. The entire incident had taken less than 30 minutes. Less than 30 minutes to be treated like a criminal in his own driveway? Less than 30 minutes to have his rights violated and his dignity stripped away. Less than 30 minutes to completely shatter his sense of safety and belonging. Marcus sat down at his dining room table. His work was still waiting for him. Spreadsheets and tax forms that needed his attention. But he couldn't focus. His mind kept replaying the encounter. 6 officers, handcuffs, having to prove he lived in his own house. The casual way they'd treated him like a suspect rather than a citizen. The assumption of guilt rather than innocence. He pulled out his phone and started searching. He needed to know his options, his rights, what recourse he had. He found similar stories immediately. A black man arrested while moving into his own apartment. A Latina woman handcuffed while babysitting white children in her care. an Asian teenager detained for sitting in his own car. The examples went on, an endless scroll of people criminalized for existing while not white. Do you think this happens more often than the news reports? Type yes or no below. Start here. Marcus contacted a civil rights attorney the next day. He brought Mrs. Patterson's video, his documentation of the incident, the photos he'd taken of the marks on his wrists. The attorney listened to his account, watched the video twice, and explained his options carefully. He could file a complaint with the police department's internal affairs division, though the attorney warned him that most complaints resulted in the officers being cleared. But it would create an official record. He could pursue a civil rights lawsuit, though that would be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. He could go to the media and share his story publicly, make this visible, force people to see what happened. Marcus chose to do all three. He filed the formal complaint, he authorized the attorney to begin preparing a lawsuit, and he contacted a local news station that had been covering stories about racial profiling. The news segment aired the following week. It showed portions of Mrs. Patterson's video, included an interview with Marcus, who spoke calmly but firmly about what happened, and it featured a statement from the police department. The department's statement defended the officers completely. They'd responded appropriately to a 911 call. They'd followed proper procedure. They'd released Marcus as soon as his identity was confirmed. Everything was by the book. That was the problem, though. The book allowed this to happen. The procedures permitted officers to handcuff a man at his own mailbox, based solely on a vague 911 call. The policies protected the officers who'd violated Marcus's rights. The system was working exactly as designed. The story spread through the community quickly. People shared it online, debated it in comment sections, discussed it at dinner tables. Some expressed outrage on Marcus's behalf. Others defended the police, insisting they were just being cautious, just responding to a call, just doing what they had to do. The 911 caller eventually came forward voluntarily through the news station. He was a man who lived several blocks away and had been driving through the neighborhood that afternoon. He'd seen Marcus at the mailbox and something made him uneasy, so he called police. When asked what specifically seemed suspicious, the caller struggled to articulate it. Marcus just seemed like he didn't belong there. Didn't belong. In his own neighborhood. At his own mailbox. At his own home. When the reporter pressed about whether race played a factor, the caller insisted it didn't. He would have called regardless of race, he claimed, but statistics and studies showed otherwise. Research demonstrated that people were significantly more likely to perceive people of color as suspicious, even when engaged in identical activities. The same action viewed as normal in a white person became threatening in a person of color. The internal affairs investigation took 4 months. The conclusion was exactly what Marcus's attorney had predicted. The officers acted within department policy. The stop was justified based on the 911 call. The detention was justified pending verification of identity. The handcuffing was justified for officer safety. Every action justified by policies that enabled racial profiling to continue unchallenged. The civil lawsuit moved forward slowly through the legal system. Depositions were scheduled and rescheduled. Documents were requested and reviewed. Motions were filed and argued. The city's attorneys fought every step, defending their officers and their procedures. They weren't going to make this easy. Marcus continued living in his house on Oakwood Avenue. He still worked from home. He still checked his mail. But it was different now. Every time he walked to the mailbox, he felt hyper-aware of his surroundings. Who was watching? Who might call the police? What normal activity might be interpreted as suspicious because of his skin color? His relationship with his neighborhood had fundamentally changed. Some neighbors showed tremendous support, stopping by to express their disgust at what happened. Others avoided him, uncomfortable with the attention and controversy his situation had brought to their quiet street. A few seemed to view him differently now, as though being detained by police suggested he must have done something to deserve it. Marcus considered moving, starting over somewhere else where he could just be a new neighbor instead of the guy who got arrested at his mailbox. But anger kept him there. Why should he have to leave? He'd done nothing wrong. Moving felt like letting racism win. Like admitting he didn't belong in a space he'd paid for, maintained, and called home for 7 years. Almost a year after the incident, the city agreed to settle the lawsuit. They would pay Marcus an undisclosed sum without admitting any wrongdoing. That was standard in settlements. Money exchanged, but no fault admitted. No apology offered. No acknowledgement that rights were violated. Just cash to close the case and move on. The settlement also required the police department to review its policies on suspicious person calls and implement additional training on implicit bias. Marcus had little faith that training would change anything meaningful. The same promises had been made in other cities after other incidents. Yet the incidents kept happening with disturbing regularity. The money didn't make Marcus whole. It didn't erase the memory of standing in handcuffs while neighbors watched. It didn't restore his sense of security in his own home. It didn't prevent the next person from being profiled. It was just money. What stayed with Marcus most wasn't even the fear he'd felt, though that was significant. It was the casual nature of the whole encounter. The officers hadn't hesitated, they hadn't doubted, they'd received a vague description and immediately treated him as a criminal. The system had supported them at every level, the dispatcher who sent them, the sergeant who ordered him detained, the investigators who cleared them. Everyone played their role in violating his rights, and everyone was protected by the policies that made it all legal. This is what systemic racism looks like in practice. Not necessarily hateful individuals, but systems and structures that produce racially discriminatory outcomes. A man of color checking his mail becomes a suspicious person. A racially biased 911 call becomes a justified police response. Handcuffing someone at their own home becomes proper procedure. The system functions as designed, and the design is the problem. Start here. Marcus's experience isn't rare. It's not an unusual malfunction of an otherwise fair system. It's a Wednesday afternoon. It's checking the mail. It's living while not white in America. Countless people experience similar incidents constantly. Some end with handcuffs and release like Marcus. Some end with arrest on fabricated charges. Some end with violence. Some end with funerals. The common element is the automatic assumption of criminality. The presumption that people of color are out of place. The burden of proving your right to exist in your own spaces. The question isn't what Marcus should have done differently. He handled it perfectly. He stayed calm, complied with commands, explained clearly, provided identification. The question is why he had to do any of that. Why a man checking his own mail had to prove he belonged in his own home. Why his word wasn't sufficient. Why 6 officers showed up for envelopes. Until we address those questions honestly and confront the biases and systems that enable these incidents to repeat endlessly, nothing changes. The policies remain the same. The training stays inadequate. The officers keep responding the same way. And more people like Marcus find themselves detained for the crime of existing while not white. Marcus still lives on Oakwood Avenue. He still checks his mail, though it will never feel simple again. He still maintains his lawn and pays his mortgage. He refuses to be driven from his home. But something broke that Wednesday afternoon. The illusion of safety shattered. The belief that his property offered protection from profiling proved false. He understands now in a way that goes bone deep, that his skin color marks him as suspicious to some people, regardless of his actions, his location, or his accomplishments. That knowledge is exhausting and infuriating, and the daily reality for millions of people of color. Navigating a society that views them as threats first and citizens second. So next time you see a story about someone being arrested or detained for something ordinary, something you've done countless times without thought, understand it's not exaggerated. It's not someone playing victim. It's a system that treats people differently based on race, that criminalizes the existence of people who don't fit a certain profile, that demands constant proof of belonging. Marcus's mailbox still stands at the end of his driveway. The mail still arrives every day. But the simple act of checking it carries a weight now that it never should have. That loss of ease and security and normalcy can't be restored by any settlement or policy change. If this story opened your eyes to something you hadn't fully understood before, consider sharing it. These experiences need to reach people who haven't lived this reality. That's how awareness grows. That's how change starts. And if you've lived through something similar, know that your story matters. Your experience is valid, and you're not alone. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to this channel so we can continue sharing stories that need to be told. Hit that like button if this moved you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because until we all understand what's really happening, nothing will change. The next time you check your mail without a second thought, remember Marcus. Remember that for millions of people, that simple act carries a burden it never should. And maybe, just maybe, that awareness will be the first step toward building a world where everyone can check their mail in peace.